Based on history, because you can only use history to predict the future. Based on history, when South Carolina contained and held 3, was any propaganda targeted at South Carolina, Charleston? No. Thank you. Now, Sheriff, you mentioned in your testimony, and I'm just trying to relate all this together, that the lack of military equipment, the 1033 program, causes some concern for housing detainees?
It causes concern relative to the preparedness level and the understanding of the threat and the situations we deal with on a daily basis. That causes us great concern because we believe a lot of the decisions made by the administration, be it 1033 or otherwise, is focused on perception, not reality.
So you think it was perception that some of our police forces were being militarized and that they were using armored vehicles running through urban neighborhoods?
I'm saying that the perception that's been fostered that a armored vehicle makes us militarized in essence is wrong. That an armored vehicle that pulls up at a bank or a grocery store every day to protect money, when that bank or grocery store is being held up and a police vehicle shows up with the same armored vehicle, somehow it's scary or militarized, is false. It's there for the same reason, to protect people.
I understand, but we had tanks going through urban neighborhoods.
We have no tanks, sir. There are no tanks in police inventory in America. There's only armored vehicles with no weaponized. That's one of the false perceptions. There is no tank in police custody in America. Armored personnel carriers, big, safe boxes without weapons, sir.
Well, we're just going to agree to disagree on that. And as my sheriffs and police advocate for things, I think that one of the things, especially in the petrochemical industry, that's one of the things that my sheriffs asked for. So, but I'm just trying to figure out how we made that connection. You also say that there's a high recidivism rate with Guantanamo prisoners. What is the recidivism rate? I mean, who was released and how often do they recommit a crime?
There's been a number of studies. The most recent one that I read, there was a 30% recidivism of Guantanamo detainees returning to the battlefield.
Can I jump in on that one?
You sure, but what's the recidivism rate at the largest prison in under your jurisdiction?
Depends on the crime, but there's a fundamental difference, and I'd like to answer.
But wait. Let me ask a question.
Okay.
Because I was a state rep, I was over the Judiciary Committee, and everybody knows the general recidivism rate of their prisons. So what is your general recidivism rate?
Well, first of all, sheriffs don't run the state prison, so I can't quote you the recidivism rate. But my point that I wish to—
You run a local one. Wouldn't you run a local one? A local jail?
I do run, in fact, a jail. It depends on the crime, but typically it runs from 30 to 60, maybe 70%, depending on the crime.
Mr. Gould, you wanted to interject something?
Yes, these figures, I think, must be properly assessed by breaking them down between the detainees that were released from Guantanamo during the Bush administration and the detainees that were released from Guantanamo under the Obama administration. And the reason why that is because the Obama administration implemented a substantial process for determining whether or not it was appropriate to release the detainees. Now, any individual detainee, now in order to be released, it needs the unanimous decision of 6 senior national security officials, and then it also further requires the Secretary of Defense to certify that an individual, the security arrangements associated with the individual's transfer help keep the Americans safe. And what we've learned is that this process has worked. 94% of the detainees who have been either confirmed or suspected of rejoining the fight were released during the Bush administration. A tiny number of the detainees that have been accused of or confirmed of rejoining the fight were released under the Obama administration.
Mr. Thompson, let me, look, this is a very difficult subject, and I understand being an elected official, and I think all of the witnesses on the Republican side are elected, and with elected becomes a different responsibility. But let me ask you a question. Would you just be in favor of closing the Bureau of Prisons facility we have at Leavenworth now?
No, I would not be in favor of closing the facility. That has undue revenue for our economy, But I can say, in talking to officials and retired officials from Fort Leavenworth, the detainees coming to detainees coming from Guantanamo Bay would cause a very serious concern. Those are much different than the detainees we already house at Fort Leavenworth.
Right, because it's more minimum, well, I guess middle or minimum security?
Correct.
So you're okay with the economic development and the jobs that are created by housing minimum, but you just don't want to go to maximum or a few detainees or several detainees from Guantanamo?
Well, I'm Leavenworth.
I mean,
we know prisons.
in Leavenworth.
I mean, we're known for prisons. We're known for being able to hold and house prisoners.
Exactly.
But these prisoners are much different than any of the others that we've seen or have seen. They're 80 of the worst that we know of. There's a specific reason why they're at Guantanamo Bay, and we would not want them in Fort Leavenworth or Leavenworth for the effects it would have on our community and on our citizens. Not even the economic concern, well, including the economic concerns, but primarily the psychological concerns it would have to all our veterans, our Gold Star family members, and anyone else out there. If I could also address Mr. Good, who's talking about the symbolism of Guantanamo Bay and the reason for its closure. That symbolism was something that President Obama has used for the example why it should be closed. But that is not going to dissipate with it being closed. That is going to stay with it. We don't forget about 9/11, even though there's structures that are now built over where they have fallen. We're going to continue to have that burden, and we're going to have to worry about that threat. I would also reiterate that Mr. Good's own statements or written statements in January 2016 said that symbolism is fading.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair now recognizes Mr. Duncan from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Good, what year was the 9/11 attacks on New York?
That was 2001.
You were talking about Charleston Navy brig holding detainees, terrorists. What year was that?
2002 through 2009.
Okay, thank you. What year was the Department of Homeland Security stood up?
2002?
3.
3.
What year was this committee formed?
2004?
Okay, so what I'm showing is this has been a fluid process. We were attacked. We had to begin prosecuting a war against those that attacked us. When we captured enemy combatants on the battlefield, we had to figure out what to do with them, correct?
Yes.
So, and the Homeland had to figure out how we're going to respond to terrorism attacks on our soil. We combined 22 agencies. We created a brand new committee within the halls of Congress to continually talk about security of the Homeland. Hence, we've got this hearing talking about security of the Homeland. For your information, the recidivism rate or the number of detainees that return to the battlefield is about 30%. It doesn't matter whether they were released by the Bush administration or the Obama administration. How many terrorists shot up the Chattanooga recruitment station?
I believe it was 1.
1. 1. It only takes 1 to kill a large number of Americans somewhere in the world, whether that's U.S. soil or somewhere else. Whether they're released by Bush or released by Obama, it only takes 1 to commit heinous acts of terror against Americans. So we know that the DOD study said about 30% of those released, regardless of who released them, have returned to the battlefield. And I would argue that American lives have been lost because of them returning to the battlefield. So your argument that that Bush released more and more return to the battlefield just doesn't hold water, because it only takes 1 of the terrorists to do that. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, sir.
You heard Governor Haley talk about DOD doing a site assessment at Charleston Naval Brig, and we know that in August they did a site assessment there at Fort Leavenworth. What kind of communication have they had with you?
Representative Duncan, they've had no conversation with myself, and they've had no or little conversation with any of our city, local, or law enforcement or any officials. Everything that
Nor
we...
state officials, based on the governor's testimony, because she and Governor Brownback had sent a letter asking, right?
Correct. There has been no communication. We have no idea. There's 80 detainees that potentially could be coming. We don't know who of those 80 are coming. There's 26 that are set for release but cannot be released because they don't have a home country. There's 44 that cannot be released at all, and then there's the 10 or 7 that are being prosecuted and 3 have been convicted. Are we getting the 7? Are we getting the 3? Are we getting the 44? Are we getting the 26? We don't know. How can we even feasibly understand what type of threats any one of those people could bring to our community, and what we would have to do to strengthen our border around Fort Leavenworth, increase our law enforcement costs, increase our safety? We have no idea because we're not being talked to, and that's one of the things I would want, and I would want for our community, or any community that would look at having these detainees.
Exactly. Have any of you gentlemen visited the prison at Guantanamo Bay?
No.
No.
No. Mr. Thompson, I have. You heard the chairman say he just recently did, and I think you've been down there more than once. In 2001, 2002, when we started catching enemy combatants, they took them to Guantanamo Bay. You see a lot of pictures. Time Life, or Time Magazine, loves to show a picture of these outdoor facilities of people cooking and detainees being in a fenced-in area. But since 2002, we've built some pretty substantial prisons, facilities there. There's a medium security, there's a low security area. I don't think there's any prisoners in the low security area anymore. There's medium security, and there's a maximum security. Medium security is probably like the prison in your county. Community rooms, cell blocks off of those. They have the ability to cook their own food, do their own laundry, participate in crafts. They're still incarcerated, but it's much like what you see in counties and state facilities. Then there's a maximum security facility. These prisoners, these terrorists held in the maximum security, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, has no contact with any other prisoner. He has his own room, a cell. He's monitored 24/7, 365 by the security team that can watch his every movement while he's in that cell. They're Muslim. They have to have the ability to pray. There are compound areas outside of their cell where they can go out, get some fresh air, connected to their cell, not a community area for exercise. So they can go there. They don't have any contact with any other prisoner. There are some special circumstances holding Muslim terrorists that want to harm America, and a special prison facility has been built on Guantanamo Bay just for that purpose. In addition, there's a courtroom facility built at Guantanamo Bay at taxpayer expense for trying convicted terrorists, or captured terrorists rather, at Guantanamo Bay. So they have access, secure access, to counsel with their legal counsel, so that they can't escape the courtroom. All this is in place. If they came to the Naval Brig in Charleston or to Fort Leavenworth, I do believe that it's going to cost the taxpayer additional resources to create or recreate what we already have at Guantanamo Bay to house these very special prisoners. Are you set up the same way Guantanamo Bay is based on my description of those cell blocks?
We are not set up for that. Like I said, at this time, we would have to build a new facility. That new facility would take at least 3 years, and I'm using a comparison from what Fort Leavenworth had told me what it took to build their most recent facility, and that was 10 years ago. So that funds of $91 million might be up to $100, $120 million.
Mr. Thompson, is DOD coming up with these plans right now? Because they're not having conversations with you about what your needs are. So are they doing this unilaterally, figuring out, well, we're going to go to Fort Leavenworth and we're going to build a brand new prison. This is what it's going to look like. These are facilities it's going to have. Wouldn't they talk to you? Because you've got to run the doggone place.
Well, you know, I have no clearance to be able to talk to the Fort or the military officials on official duty, so I have no idea what they're discussing. I can tell you that I've looked at the map of Fort Leavenworth and I've been told where the idea would be. There's a Boy Scout and Girl Scout camp in the center. There's no water, there's no electricity area to connect to that area, much less having to build it. There is not the facility or capabilities to be able to house them at this time. I'm also told that the Guantanamo Bay detainees are generally, especially if they're maximum, have to have almost specialized security for one in, one out, watching over them.
So if we've got to build all these new facilities, why are we looking at existing facilities? Why don't we go down to Louisiana and go out into the high ground in the bayou and build a brand new facility? Why not go to Fort A.P. Hill right down the road here, thousands upon thousands of undeveloped acres, and drop a prison facility there? Why aren't we talking about Fort Leavenworth or Charleston if we're talking about this?
Well, I would say
it's interesting when you bring that closer to home, I do believe.
Well, I would say that if they were, I mean, in Guantanamo Bay, they are away from harming any other citizens, and that's one of the most serious concerns that we have about bringing them to the United States soil. And if to bring them into a community such as Governor Haley's Charleston, or bringing them to something like Fort Leavenworth, where there are communities of veterans as well as just citizens like myself living there, that's going to cause them undue threat, concern, economic impact, social impact, psychological impact, all these things just by moving them here.
Absolutely.
The gentleman's time has long expired. The gentleman now recognizes the ranking member.
I'd just like to add that there is